of the United States, in his public appearance today, proved that he is mentally incapable and emotionally incapable of fulfilling his constitutional duties as President of the United States. In other words, there is no President of the United States.
For years, MAGA has been selling Donald Trump as a political colossus, an inevitable force of nature who cannot be beaten. But everywhere around us, we are seeing evidence that that's not really true. And part of the reason that is happening is because Americans are seeing up close the damage, feeling the pain. People are opposing ICE agents raiding their neighbors, going out in the streets with...
Trump just got absolutely obliterated. And the takedown came from none other than Lawrence O'Donnell and Chris Hayes. Two sharp news pros, one target, and zero hesitation. What they unleashed was so brutal it left the internet gasping, laughing, and rethinking everything. The truth bombs they dropped hit hard and fast. And once you see it, there's no unseeing it. Buckle up.
Third term in the presidency. We're beginning once again tonight with something that is not actually news, shouldn't be treated as news. Today, even Donald Trump himself gave up the game of using talk of a Trump third term as a way of diverting news attention away from the Trump cruelties, especially the denial of food to hungry people around the world and soon here in the United States.
The entire Trump era is built on this kind of wish casting, psyching people out and faking strength until it is handed over to them. That is the proper context you need when you think about the freakout currently happening over this comment.
He's going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president 28.
Some mornings feel a bit strange. Other mornings, the universe hands Donald Trump a microphone, a camera, and the wild belief that he's ready for nuance. What follows isn't subtle, it's chaos wrapped in confidence. Broadcast live for everyone's disbelief.
Now, the United States Agency for International Development have pundits talk about the third term in welcoming tones in right-wing media and terrified tones in the rest of the media, so that they are not talking about the Epstein files, so that they're not talking about Donald Trump becoming the first president in history to suspend the food stamp program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This program always recognized the Trump third term talk as a diversionary tactic, not to be indulged, but only to be identified as the diversionary tactic that it is. Today, Donald Trump himself finally was forced to admit today, no doubt at the urging of Republicans in Congress who would find it unbearable to go into next year's Congress.
Then came what the internet would soon crown as peak content. Lawrence O'Donnell and Chris Hayes stepping in, not with mild critique or polite debate, but with razor-sharp surgical mockery so precise it made your coffee shake. What began innocently enough quickly turned into a masterclass in televised demolition.
I think a classic example of MAGA projecting the power they wish they had. But it comes from a place of real, genuine, palpable political weakness. I mean, take a step back and look at what's being discussed here. One of the most unpopular presidents in American history, talking about a third term less than a year into his second term. Today, the polling average kept by Nate Silver shows Donald Trump underwater by about 10 points. He's also at net double-digit negatives in the most recent polls from Economist YouGov, Quinnipiac, Reuters Ipsos, American Research Group, and Gallup. In all those polls, he is at or near his lowest approval level.
You know the kind. An ordinary news segment. A harmless clip. A few witty remarks until suddenly, the switch flips from standard coverage to pure high-grade chaos. O'Donnell leans into the microphone with the calm precision of a man who's mastered the art of dismantling a public figure without so much as blinking.
There is no functioning intelligence, no functioning judgment mechanism within the mind of the current holder of the title, President of the United States. And that person is also the holder of the nuclear codes that could destroy the planet in seconds. And he is, much to the horror of the commanding officers of the American military who listened to him today, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the history of the world. Much of the news media made the mistake of believing that all of the American commanding generals and admirals were being summoned to Quantico, Virginia, to listen to the small man of small experience.
Somewhere, Trump is probably convinced this is all a compliment. O'Donnell starts with the simplest observation imaginable, yet in his hands it becomes a scalpel. He dissects leadership, decision-making, and the delicate art of public perception. Words like strategy, coherence, and credibility drift through the air. Neutral concepts to most, but pure kryptonite to Trump. It's like handing a toddler a Rubik's Cube and casually mentioning that solving it requires patience, logic, and, heaven forbid, foresight. Chris Hayes skips the warm-up entirely. He dives headfirst into the absurdity, slicing through contradictions with a rhythm so sharp it feels choreographed for maximum embarrassment. Every Trump claim transforms into comedy gold. Every past decision becomes proof of an almost artistic commitment to chaos. At one point, Hayes resurrects a classic Trump moment, one that should have been sealed in a vault marked, "Too dangerous for public sanity." Yet here it is again, reframed so cleverly that it cuts straight through the noise. The audience can't help but marvel at the timing, the precision, the sheer audacity. The segment seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, building anticipation for each perfectly delivered jab. Then O'Donnell returns, calm as ever. He doesn't need to yell or posture. His restraint is the weapon, every measured word landing harder than a shout ever could.
Is the oldest man to ever be sworn in as president of the United States. Yes, he is older than Joe Biden was when he assumed office. And one thing we know about the presidency is that it ages people, right? I mean, you can see in the comparisons of presidents when they took office versus when they left office. And it's more than just the passage of time. They're dealing with the stress of running the most powerful country on earth. That struggle was on full display with the last president, Joe Biden, who was at the time the oldest person ever elected. And Biden was ultimately forced to drop out of his reelection bid as a result. And then the country just turned around and elected a man who, again, broke the record for the oldest person to become.
The delivery is measured, calm, deliberate, almost clinical. But the impact is devastating. O'Donnell weaves a narrative from Trump's choices, statements, and public persona. Each point builds upon the last, forming a structure of pure irony. A house of cards made entirely from the former president's own missteps. By the time O'Donnell lands the punchline, the segment has moved beyond commentary. It's performance art wrapped in journalistic precision. But Hayes isn't finished. He shifts gears with effortless control, gliding from observation to satire. Picture someone taking every contradictory, confusing, or downright bizarre Trump moment and translating it into a theatrical reading. Now imagine that performance delivered with the weary humor of a man who's seen it all and is still somehow astonished. The outcome is a perfectly orchestrated symphony of mockery, timed so precisely it feels inevitable. Trump's reactions, if they can be called that, only intensify the spectacle. Every clarification, retort, and clumsy defense becomes fresh material. It's like watching a magician expose his tricks while the audience keeps gasping anyway. Even when the illusion is gone, the wonder remains, because the trick itself is the blunder. And the laughter it provokes carries a strange rhythm. First observation, then revelation, and finally, flawless demolition.
Always just a setup for Donald Trump to harangue that audience with what turned out to be stream of consciousness madness, complete with hallucinations and an endless stream of pathological lies. A group of officers who earned their jobs in ways that Donald Trump never could, had to sit there and listen to a clown who stood before them in what appears to be a homemade brew of orange makeup slathered all over his face because he thinks it makes him look better.
Then comes the evidence, delivered with surgical timing. Next, the commentary laced with irony, disbelief, and just enough restraint to make every word sting. And finally, the closing jab, a line so sharp it doesn't just make the audience laugh, it makes them wonder how anyone could operate with such unshakable confidence amid so much chaos. Yet through the ridicule, there's an odd kind of respect, a recognition of the spectacle itself. Because Trump, for all his flaws, has always been a performer. The problem is, he's the performer who forgot to read the script, skipped rehearsal, and decided that improvisation was not only enough, but something to be applauded. O'Donnell and Hayes see the same act. But instead of following along, they rewrite it in real time, turning unintentional comedy into deliberate critique. At one point, O'Donnell pauses and the silence itself becomes commentary. You can feel the weight of the critique hanging in the air as he points out decisions that, under ordinary circumstances, might have been dismissed, but here, under the harsh studio light, are impossible to ignore. Trump's approach to negotiation, messaging, and even basic coherence is laid bare. Hayes seizes the moment with precision, delivering a biting counterpoint that transforms pattern into parody. What emerges is so absurdly consistent, it almost resembles art. The laughter from the audience is genuine, but it's tinged with disbelief. Watching it all unfold feels like witnessing someone build a sandcastle, while a tsunami looms, utterly confident that their technique will somehow hold against the inevitable.
The guy doesn't look great. He's got a reoccurring bruise on his hand. He's constantly trying to cover up makeup. He's got severely swollen ankles, which the White House attributes to a very common condition among senior citizens. But it's more than that. Mentally, the guy seems off. He's constantly drifting off during meetings, unable to properly understand questions from reporters, rambling even more than he did during his first term. And that problem is compounded by the fact the administration is among the least transparent we've ever seen. Just take a look at this official White House announcement about the president scheduled on Friday morning. President Trump will visit Walter Reed Medical Center for a planned meeting and remarks with the troops. While there, President Trump will stop by for his routine yearly checkup. He will then return to the White House. President Trump is considering going to the Middle East shortly thereafter. Wait, what was that part sandwiched in the middle there?
Every misstep becomes a punchline. Every contradiction a running gag that somehow never loses its sting. The transitions are seamless, each segment flowing from observation to commentary to satire to evidence with almost musical precision. There's no dead air, no filler, just a rhythm so sharp it feels orchestrated. The editing, pacing, and tone merge into a spectacle that paints Trump as the unwitting lead in a farce he doesn't realize he's starring in. But the real brilliance lies beyond the humor. It's in the precision. O'Donnell and Hayes operate like craftsmen, every clip and soundbite placed with intent. They know exactly when to pause, when to press forward, and when to circle back for maximum impact. Trump's long history of statements transforms into a masterfully woven tapestry of irony and timing, each thread revealing another layer of absurdity. And then comes the psychological duel. O'Donnell's calm, almost surgical composure against Hayes's dry, ironic flair. The contrast amplifies the effect. One steady and deliberate, the other quick and biting. Together, they turn critique into performance, leaving the audience laughing, stunned, and oddly impressed by the artistry of destruction.
About that one thing, that the madman orange makeup he slathers on himself makes him look better. Maybe it does. We don't know. Maybe the actual sight of the actual color of his 79-year-old skin is much worse than the orange clown confection that he chooses, but we don't know. Or maybe the orange junk on his face is yet another proof that the man has no capacity to make a judgment about anything.
You don't just watch Trump get mocked. You witness the collision of his past decisions, his present absurdities, and his unshakable self-confidence, forming a singular, unstoppable force of satire. Every moment is intentional, the pauses, the timing, the glances. A raised eyebrow here, a carefully emphasized word there, a perfectly chosen clip. Each piece builds toward the same conclusion, that Trump is a masterclass in chaos management, though hardly the kind anyone would aspire to replicate. What makes it brilliant is the craftsmanship. O'Donnell and Hayes move like chess players, each critique a calculated strike, each observation a deliberate counter. Their rhythm pulls the audience along until realization dawns collectively. Trump's theatrics have unintentionally become an endless source of self-written comedy. Yet beneath the laughter, there's a striking sense of curiosity. The two don't just ridicule, they analyze, dissect, and contextualize. Their approach feels almost academic, as if they're mapping the anatomy of political absurdity in real time. They explore not just what Trump says or does, but why it keeps circling back to irony. The result isn't merely mockery, it's a study in how spectacle, ego, and improvisation intertwine. And in this ongoing lesson, O'Donnell and Hayes prove themselves professors of precision, timing, and masterful delivery.
talk to the troops at Walter Reed, and hey, while you're there, might as well pop in for the yearly checkup. But here's the thing, Donald Trump already had his annual checkup. It was in April. Here's the official White House readout from that visit, the one where they said he's 6'2" and 224 pounds, which is, by the way, the same height and weight as Patrick Mahomes. But if you're concerned about the president needing 2 physicals in 1 year, have no fear. Trump says he's doing just fine.
I think I'm in great shape, but I'll let you know. But I have no difficulty thus far. Is there wood around here? I'll knock on. No difficulty. Physically, I feel very good. Mentally, I feel very good. You know, I did about 6-7 months ago. I do physicals. I like to, when I'm around, I like to check. I also did a cognitive.
Hayes' segments often drift into surreal exaggeration, amplifying the sheer audacity of Trump's words until they sound almost too outrageous to be real. O'Donnell, in contrast, grounds that absurdity in logic, methodically exposing how each statement, when placed in context, forms a pattern of improvisational chaos. Together, they create a rhythm of critique, alternating between incredulity and amusement, each moment building upon the last until the audience is completely absorbed in the spectacle. By the segment's end, a strange inevitability sets in. The evidence has been shown, the commentary delivered, and the absurdity is undeniable. Trump's attempts at authority, credibility, even coherence lie dismantled under the careful precision of their analysis. Yet the audience doesn't just laugh. They marvel at the choreography of it all, the timing, the tone, the effortless balance between wit and critique. Then comes the aftermath. Social media erupts. Clips circulate within minutes. Memes multiply. Threads ignite with a mix of laughter, disbelief, and admiration for the craftsmanship. Each post, retweet, and reaction magnifies the moment's cultural impact. Because this isn't just journalism, it's theater. A performance born from chaos and refined into commentary. Trump provides the raw material, but it's O'Donnell and Hayes who turn it into art. With sharp observation, biting irony, and flawless timing, they elevate political critique into performance, leaving audiences both horrified by the content and delighted by the mastery of its delivery.
Gets dementia. How will we know? Donald Trump's mental decline, which is more and more obvious, started from such a low level of mental processing power that it's hard to track his decline. It's from low to lower. And then there are days like today when Donald Trump asks himself out loud in public if he is allowed to appoint himself chair of the Federal Reserve. Now, it may be tiresome to hear, but we must not grow weary.
Even after the segment ends, its impact lingers. Every point, joke, and ironic juxtaposition continues to ripple outward through conversations, water cooler chatter, and late-night social media threads. Meanwhile, Trump remains blissfully unaware that his chaos has been transformed into a masterclass of public mockery. It's impossible not to admire the execution. Not the subject. No one applauds the mess. But the delivery, the timing, pacing, and balance between satire and evidence, the precision of every cutting remark. O'Donnell and Hayes orchestrate each moment to perfection, leaving the audience laughing, shaking their heads, and marveling at how someone could navigate public life with such audacious confidence while being so spectacularly exposed. This is the kind of segment that will be shared, dissected, and studied endlessly. Watching Trump systematically dismantled by O'Donnell and Hayes isn't mere entertainment. It's a lesson in timing, irony, and the art of turning chaos into comedy. Every word, pause, and sarcastic inflection contributes to an experience that is simultaneously devastating, hilarious, and exhilarating, a perfectly crafted spectacle of critique and wit.
Sitting president doing this out in the open would have, I believe, ended the career of any president not named Trump. It's the biggest justice scandal we've seen in our lifetime. He is directly ordering the pretextual prosecutions of political critics, of people he doesn't like, in a ham-fisted, retaliatory, lawless fashion that violates the laws of the country the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of liberty. Putting your political opponents in jail because they are your opponents, not because of what they did, is the heart of tyranny.
As the final clip fades and the segment concludes, the message is unmistakable. This was never about subtlety or restraint. It was about precision, timing, and exposing the absurdity of one man's public life to anyone paying attention. For the audience, that is more than enough. A perfect storm of chaos, mockery, and hilarity, delivered with such finesse that there's no room for argument, no space for denial, and no doubt that some performances are meant to be observed, dissected, and laughed at endlessly. Even after the screen goes dark, the echoes remain. Tweets flare, reaction videos multiply, and late-night hosts casually sprinkle references as seasoning, knowing the audience already knows the recipe. In this moment, Trump's legacy is distilled into a series of perfectly timed punchlines and ironic contradictions, each amplified by O'Donnell's surgical precision and Hayes's sharp wit. It's a reminder that the most devastating commentary isn't always loud. It's clever, unrelenting, and executed with precision, leaving audiences and even the subject momentarily speechless. Every pause, every clip, every sarcastic inflection combines into a masterful experience, simultaneously funny, brutal, and unforgettable, proving that timing and craft can transform chaos into a performance worth studying and sharing.